town in Honeydew. So they sold the asset with a half acre in town, and I'm promised to restore it to its glory. And they sold it to me with that promise, and I am.
Oh, excellent. There's quite a few Edders in Ferndale.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful.
Well, thanks, everyone. I see we still have folks trickling in. Yeah, and thanks for making the time on this incredible. It's an incredibly beautiful day today here in Humboldt County. So I hope everyone's getting a chance to enjoy the weather. And I guess I'm going to ask Eric this real quick. This is a joint meeting. And so just so I'm clear on my protocol, am I kind of getting us started as the director of HWMA, or is this more of a staff's going to lead this call to order and things?
Chair Castellano, it would be you.
Okay, great. Didn't want to presume. Okay, well then let's get started. So welcome everyone. We will call the meeting to order and begin with a roll call. We'll start with the HWMA board of directors members. I'm here. Elaine Hogan.
Here.
Meredith Matthews. Did you say here, Meredith? I think maybe.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Robin Smith.
Present.
Steve Madrone. Okay, Director Madrone is absent. And Frank Wilson. Frank Wilson is absent. I do remember Frank possibly saying that there were people who are, working other jobs, and so we may have people come in partway through the meeting. We'll just note that when it happens. And now we'll move to the Humboldt County Solid Waste Local Task Force. For the City of Arcata, we have Emily Benby.
Present.
Hi, Emily. City of Blue Lake, Trevor Punea.
Yeah. Yep. I'm here. Sorry, I was a little late.
No, you're okay. And if I mispronounce your name, feel free, please, to correct me.
It's Pumnia, but no worries at all.
Okay, thanks. City of Eureka, Donna Wood.
Yes, present.
Hi, Donna. City of Ferndale, Jay Parrish.
Yes.
City of Fortuna, Merritt Perry.
Yep, I'm here.
Hi, Merritt. County of Humboldt, Tom Matson.
Here.
Hi, Tom. City of Rio Del, Kyle Knopp.
Present.
Great. And City of Trinidad, Eli Nafa.
Yes, here.
All right, welcome everyone. And with that, we'll move on to introductions of joint study session participants.
Chair Castellano, if I may, because of the amount of participants and the different entities that we have, I'd like to remind everybody to make sure if you are a part of the HWMA board, so I've already adjusted some of your names. Make sure that you have your name and the representation that you have in this meeting. So for HWMA board members, I've placed HWMA board. For LTF members, you have the LTF and the city or the jurisdiction that you're representing. And then anyone who is not a part of the HWMA board or the LTF, obviously just put the organization that you're representing just because of the sheer amount of individuals we have on this call at this time.
Thanks, Eric. And do you want to give folks a chance who, aren't either on the LTF or on the board of directors a chance just to maybe say their name and their organization?
I mean, that would be at your pleasure, Chair, if that's something that you'd like. There's probably over 30 at this point, though. So
okay.
that'd probably be pretty time consuming.
In the interest of time, we're going to just do that. If you are presenting at the meeting, just please make sure when it's your chance to present to introduce yourself, and then we'll go on from there. And so we will move on to opening remarks by H.W. May and I'm just going to say the LTF chairs. Okay. And I know I'm starting off, and then I'm going to hand it over to Donna Woods, who's the chair of the Humboldt County Solid Waste Local Task Force. It's much easier to say LTF. So welcome everyone to the joint study session of the HWMA Board of Directors and the Humboldt County Solid Waste Local Task Force. As you know, I'm Leslie Castellano, chair of the HWMA Board of Directors. The intent of this joint study session is to present an overview of the draft documents prepared by Edgar & Associates and Abound Food Care to answer general questions by HWMA Board and local task force members, and hear issues that should be addressed when the documents are brought forward for the board's formal review at the HWMA's regular meeting scheduled for October 13th, 2022. I think most folks here know this, but HWMA is a joint powers authority formed in 1999 and comprised of 6 members, the cities of Arcata, Blue Lake, Eureka, Ferndale, Rio Dell, and the county. HWMA is responsible for the operational activities of the Hawthorne Street Transfer Station, Eureka Recycling Center, which is now closed, as I'm sure we all know, the Household Hazardous Waste Facility, which remains open, and the Cummings Road landfill. Through the Joint Powers Agreement, member agencies agree to provide solid waste flow control to HWMA and direct their franchise haulers to deliver curbside collected solid waste to HWMA's transfer station. Based on this tonnage commitment, HWMA is responsible for entering into long-term transportation and disposal agreements managing the waste. HWMA also receives self-hauled solid waste from the general public in addition to green waste, hazardous waste, and other materials diversion programs and services. And now I will introduce Donna Wood, who's the chair of the Humboldt County Solid Waste Local Task Force. Go for it, Donna.
Thank you, Leslie. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to give a little bit of background on the Solid Waste Local Task Force, or the LTF, as we often call it. It's a task force required by each county in the state to help with coordinated and cost-effective regional integrated systems for the management of waste and to identify new and ongoing solid waste management issues of countywide or regional concern. This is due to the 1989 state legislation called the Integrated Waste Management Act, often referred to as AB 939. This act restructured waste management regulations and established integrated waste management hierarchy to guide local agencies in implementation in order of priority, first being source reduction, second being recycling and composting, and third being environmentally safe transformation and land disposal. Humboldt County's Solid Waste Local Task Force, or LTF, is an 8-member task force comprised of staff representatives from the cities of Arcata, Blue Lake, Eureka, Ferndale, Fortuna, Rio Dell, Trinidad, and the county of Humboldt, who meet regularly. Over the past years, the LTF members have worked towards planning for regional approaches for jurisdictional compliance, activities related to AB 939, and other regulatory regulations such as SB 1383. Local task force members recognize that implementation of regionalization efforts and regional-based activities requires ongoing participation, commitment, and support with all the jurisdictions working together. This joint study session reflects our efforts in the coordination of SB 1383 compliance, roadmap planning for Humboldt County and each of our jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. And it's been, amazing from the seat of the board of directors to see the LTF folks all really convening around this issue. I just want to let folks know also, if you're at our last HWMA meeting, you probably heard me say that I have another special meeting for the city of Eureka at 5 p.m. tonight. So I will be dipping out at 4:55 to run over to the city of Eureka. And at that point, I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Elaine Hogan to finish out the meeting. So it won't be a shock to everyone when it happens. And with that, we will move on to item number 4, which is the introduction of organics diversion and processing in Humboldt, with an overview by Eric Keller Heckman, the HWMA Interim Executive Director.
Thank you, Chair Castellano. Can everybody see that? Okay. So as noted, the intent of the study session is to receive an overview of the draft documents prepared by Edgar and Associates and Abound Food Care. To answer, we will also be answering any general questions by the HWMA board and local task force members, and identify issues that should be addressed when the documents are brought for the board's formal review at HWMA's regular meeting scheduled for October 13th of 2022. Just a little background about SB 1383. SB 1383 is the short-lived Climate Pollutant Reduction Act. It was signed into law in 2016 with a compliance date of January 1st of 2022 for the majority of the programs within the legislation. SB 1383 requires the state to reduce organic waste disposal by 75% by 2025. In turn, the state tasked these responsibilities to local jurisdictions. The law also requires the state to increase edible food recovery by 20% by 2025. Reduction strategies are expected to be achieved through several methodologies. Edible food recovery is one, capacity planning, organics collection and processing, education and outreach, contamination and monitoring, and procurement. This is a SB 1383 compliance timeline for the work done by Edgar and Associates. So at the request of the local task force, the HWMA Board of Directors agreed in July of 2021 to coordinate and issue a request for proposal for regional SB 1383 compliance services. Proposals were evaluated by LTF members and HWMA staff with a recommendation that the HWMA board enter into an agreement with Edgar and Associates at their November 11th, 2021 meeting. HWMA serves as the lead for project administration with assistance from participating jurisdiction representatives. Those participating jurisdictions also contributed to a cost share to assist in the funding through a letter of commitment to HWMA for this process. The scope of services included key deliverables related to the compliance plan roadmap, which is what we'll be receiving tonight, organics processing and collection, edible food recovery plan, procurement, and waste management fee structure. Deliverables were expected to aid in the establishment of a broad recommendation to jurisdictions. Their existing municipal code outlined critical pathways to enable expansion of existing food recovery programs and recommend organic diversion processing options. Along with that is the identification of new programs and policies as appropriate. This regional approach was originally expected to be presented to the local task force and HWMA by May 16th of 2022. Today's study session enables this planning effort to move forward. This regional effort did not represent a commitment by individual jurisdictions or HWMA, but rather deliverables were expected to aid participating jurisdictions with their decision making related to food recovery programs. Short and long-term diversion programs, and new programs or policies as appropriate. Based on these plans that were to be provided and the level of interest from jurisdictions, the HWMA board at that time could consider whether to assume organics processing efforts and the steps needed to implement those activities. Our first presenter tonight is Mike Larakos. Executive Director of Abound Food Care. He will present a 15-minute presentation of the edible food recovery capacity study, followed by an opportunity for HWMA and task force members to ask questions and discuss the study. At that time, staff recommends a short break, 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the will of the board, followed by our second presenter, Evan Edgar. He's the president of Edgar and Associates. He will have another presentation around 15 minutes on the SB 1383 compliance, organics regional compliance services, followed by questions and discussions. Following the presentation, staff asked HWMA board to identify any issues that you would like addressed when these documents are brought to you for formal review in October. I will make note that we received a couple changes from jurisdictions regarding the edible food recovery, some of the generator lists, and Edgar and Associates also had a couple of grammatical and spelling fixes on their documents. Those were not made available until after this board packet went out. So we will make sure, staff will make sure that those changes get implemented as well. So and with that, I ask the chair to introduce our first presenter.
Great, thank you. And I just want to recognize that HWMA board member Frank Wilson is also present. And with that, introducing Mike Lerakos, I'm sorry, Mike, with Abound Food Care, with your presentation on edible food recovery. Thanks for being here, Mike.
If it's possible for me to have the screen share, I'll share it from my computer. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so Mike and I are actually going to take this presentation together. We've done a friendly divide and conquer on it. And I will note that this is going to be a very brief presentation compared to what we were able to deliver to the LTF. So I apologize in advance if it feels like we're skipping over items. But as discussed, this is a summary of the report that we've provided to the region. Through our activities, we called 95 potential tier 1 generators, 236 potential tier 2 generators, and confirmed whether or not they met the threshold of the tier 1 and tier 2 definitions within 1383. In addition, very importantly, we surveyed 49 food recovery organizations that are operating within the Humboldt region to assess if what their current capacity was, their potential expansion, and how they could help fill the gap between generators that were currently in compliance with 1383 and those that would need to be brought into compliance. We did specific sort of deep dive surveys into the two largest organizations, which included Redwood Empire Food Bank that delivers food into Humboldt County, and of course, Food for People. I saw one of the representatives here today, which is an awesome organization that works within Humboldt County and has a great regional capacity with, to help close some of these gaps. So through the surveys, we identified capacity and, importantly, different strategies to help close capacity gaps that we did identify. It did come with a funding recommendation, which I won't go over because it's fairly detailed within the report, in addition to advice that we passed along on the requirements within the Food Recovery Ordinance, education and outreach plans, including supporting documents that can be used as templates. And we've, as I've stated, presented this report to the LTF. We received wonderful feedback regarding the generator lists that have been incorporated into the final report that you should all hopefully have in hand, if not now, soon. So as a broad brush, through the report, out of those initial 49 food recovery organizations, these organizations on this screen right now were the ones that identified they had available capacity and or plans to expand existing capacity. I will note that some of these organizations are relatively large. Food for People is a great example. Others are relatively small. So we sort of acknowledge within the report the range of sizes of the nonprofits that exist within Humboldt County. As I mentioned, we did a survey of tier 1 and tier 2 generator capacity. And as a requirement for 1383, we made an estimate on the number of edible food tons that might be headed to landfill currently within Humboldt County. So we assessed this in 3 different ways. The first was based on your total disposal that you have and applying a waste characterization on that disposal number on how much we think is edible food being sent to landfill. The second was looking at the existing generators, tier 1 and tier 2, and their employment data, and getting a generator. It's a generation amount by employment data that estimates the total amount of edible food by generator on a waste characterization. The third is we actually looked at Food for People's data on what their current collection amounts were. And based on that current collection, we extrapolated the amounts on the existing tier 1 and tier 2s that are not in compliance and how much food that might be annually. So CalRecycle requires a number. These numbers, as you can imagine, are pretty hard to identify since there's not a lot of tracking that happens in regards to edible food recovery. So having these 3 options gives the jurisdiction sort of a good range in what might be available and where your targets might be heading. As Mike's going to talk about in a couple slides from now, these don't take into account the impact of source reduction or impact of other items that might reduce this food that is acknowledged within the report. So to summarize where we are on the tier 1 and tier 2 generators, for tier 1, you have a total of 54 generators that would have to comply with 1383. The great news is 33 of those generators already have an existing food recovery program. Those generators may have to have, some may not have the contracts in place, but I mean, it's a great start for Humboldt County to show compliance with 1383, where we can focus our efforts on the 21 generators that either didn't respond to our surveys, where we have to do a little bit of checking on a local level to see if they meet the threshold, or they acknowledge they're not participating, which is the 10, where we would have to bring them into compliance. For tier 2 is a larger lift across the state. We're dealing with a lot of smaller businesses. There are a lot of schools within Humboldt County, which actually is a really great opportunity for you guys, where other jurisdictions might have to deal with a lot of restaurants, which are very hard to service. Having a lot of schools within the tier 2 list and making up the bulk of that amount is actually an easier pathway to compliance, because there's a lot of established food recovery programs that happen at schools. So by 2024, we need to ensure that 130 of the tier 2s are brought into compliance, of which 44 are already participating today. So again, a really great baseline for you to get started with and ensure that you're meeting this part of 1383. So by jurisdiction, these are the breakdown of tier 1s and tier 2s by jurisdictions within the county. And so you can see fairly clearly who within the counties are participating and not participating. And not surprisingly, of course, we know that the larger urban centers are the ones that are sort of carrying the weight of having more tier 1 and tier 2 generators by location. So within the report, there's a lot of detail that we went into to assess factors and challenges within expanding food recovery programs. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail just given the time constraints and really wanting to leave time for questions. But part of our strategy was really to look at Humboldt as an individual region, acknowledge the factor and challenges that exist within Humboldt, and then create strategies that would identify and work towards closing those gaps. As you can see, we've identified lack of expansion as a challenge, but acknowledging that Food for People actually has a great expansion right now, that they're developing a new building, and we were very excited to see the impact of that in assisting the region and closing the compliance gap. So when we say lack of expansion, it's really for the nonprofits that are not Food for People that are responsible for a lot of the other types of distribution. And where that becomes challenging, particularly in a rural region, is lack of cold storage. And so that's something that was acknowledged within the report to say, we need to work on things like logistics. So helping trucks drive from place to place without putting food at risk. So making sure that if we have to bring food from North County down to an urban center for distribution, that we're setting up the logistics properly so that that food can stay cold and stay safe during that logistics, during that drive. So with that, I'll pass it on to Mike, who's going to give a great overview of this.
Great, thanks. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure if my image is on there. I had some technical issues, so now I'm on my phone. I apologize. First of all, Monica, give me a thumbs up if I can be heard.
You're good.
All right, perfect. So the capacity study strategies that we went with were a short term and then also a longer term. It's our estimation that we are in the unknown. This is a startup operation, so to speak, in terms of we really don't know what kind of impact edible food recovery that's mandated will have on source reduction. So I think it might be more prudent to just look at this in the short term to start off with. And that was number one, as Monica mentioned, Food for People does a phenomenal job. They're the heavy lifters in this. They're reaching out and touching almost all of the nonprofit agencies that feed people. So it's important for them that we were able to support what they're doing by getting them the ability to onboard those tier 1 and tier 2 generators, provide them with the warehouse position they need, the drivers, the refrigerated box truck that's required to do this endeavor safely, handling food correctly, and then pallet jacks and scales in order to be more efficient and also to be able to track the data, meaning how many pounds. On the pantry level, you've got a broad-based pantry network in the county, and it's important that we provide them with the support that they require. And so we identified those pantries. We identified the need for alternate cold storage because there is a universal lack of cold storage, and the ability to have that third-party on-site food safety training. And this is important to be able to augment what environmental health may typically do for the for-profit sector, but be able to give those nonprofit agencies that instruction, that help, that guidance that will require us to be able to handle food safely and ensure that we don't have a foodborne illness that affects people negatively. And then also the logistics coordination. What we want to avoid is having an activity of recovering excess edible food and getting it to nonprofit agencies, but ultimately we're burning up so much fuel in the process that we're negating any benefit. So the idea is we can coordinate logistics to ensure that whether it's nonprofit or private sector, that the resources that they have are being fully utilized. And then finally, the overarching program is the ability to have this independent food recovery administrator to basically be the coordinator to ensure that everybody is optimized at what they're doing, that we're filling the gaps, and that we're providing resources that are required and using those resources to their optimum. And then last but not least is food safety. It always comes down to food safety. This entire endeavor across the state goes for naught if we're unable to keep the food supply safe, and God forbid we have a foodborne illness that leads to a fatality. So food safety is critical. It's also critical in providing the food industry with the comfort level of participating. Then if we look at the long-term strategy, it was to provide Food for People with that program coordinator to oversee this, the drivers, the warehouse position they require, et cetera. And then on the repurposing kitchens, which is a critical tool in taking bulk food, repurposing it into meals, vacuum sealing, which delays the aging process. It allows us to get food to where it needs to go in an expansive rural area. We need to be able to provide that funding, the kitchen coordination, and then finally, again, that overarching program, which is really logistics support and then food recovery software to make this process more effective.
So as a part of the report, you'll find an interactive map that we used as a resource for the region that you can click on a link, and it actually gives different cities and stakeholders the ability to zoom in and out on the identified tier 1 and tier 2 generators that require compliance, and then nearby nonprofits that might be able to close that compliance gap. So that's an available resource to you all that could certainly be built upon as we start looking at regional components and closing gaps regionally to bring the Humboldt into compliance. For education and outreach, we provided a template on existing education and outreach programs that are being used in other parts to really help the cities get a start up into communicating with tier 1 and tier 2 generators, providing basic information on 1383, and as Mike touched on food and safety. I'm going to let Mike take over on the strategy because I think Abound has a really phenomenal approach to getting this messaging out in a way that's very consistent through different avenues.
Yeah, thank you. We really look at this as having a comprehensive municipal approach to it. In other words, we need to marry all the elements of the municipal apparatus to identify not only food donors, but also the nonprofit agencies that are doing the work. So let's start with building and planning. Very critical. Any operation that's either going to build a restaurant, take over a business, or pull a conditional use permit is going to have to go through the building and planning department. That's a great opportunity to have that information sheet, similar to what you see on the slide, have that ability, that touch point. And then also working with facility designers who in turn work with the planning departments, both on the planning side and then on the final building permit side is another way to get another touch point. Public Works, so many events that require food or involve food are held through Parks and Rec. I jumped over one, sorry about that, are held at Parks and Rec department, and they'll pull permits. Another great opportunity to provide them with information on not only how to handle food, but what type of food is recoverable at that kind of a setting and which need to be diverted. Back up to the public works side, I always mention that the unintended consequence of 1383 is that we put food in the hands of folks who will work with the environment and waste. And it's unfortunate, but it all rolls in together. The public works side has the opportunity to take the environmental approach, but then we work in every other element of the municipal apparatus. Schools, of course, are critical. They have the ability, they are, especially coming out of COVID, they were prolific at feeding the community, especially during an emergency. It's important that we roll in schools to this effort as well through source reduction and recovery. The utility companies can be a huge benefit to us as well through mentioning on their invoices and billing to operators. So it's important that utilities be involved. Service and trade organizations have a role in this, whether it's restaurant associations, grocery associations, or just the service and organizations like Rotaries and Kiwanis and et cetera. They all have a role. They all have a part to play in this. And then finally, private industry participation. That goes beyond just the donors, but it's the ancillary private industry that can participate, logistics, marketing. There's all these other ways private industry can participate with technology, et cetera. It's critical that we roll them into that. And then finally, environmental health. As I mentioned, various environmental health departments will take a different approach. Some will view themselves as regulatory only. Some will participate in outreach and education, but we've got to roll all these elements into one program.
And I will just add, just jumping off of Mike's mention of private industry participation, one of the things that we did query within the survey is, are nonprofits using third-party cold storage? So this might look like a nonprofit being given some sort of shared space within a refrigerator at a nearby restaurant that they can use to help shore up their existing operations. And so it's opportunities like this within a county like Humboldt that's fairly rural, that we can really expand on. And that serves as a very good way to reduce the cost of compliance by bringing other private industries into this that can participate in a philanthropic way or help reduce sort of that cost outlay. So instead of having to buy refrigeration, you can rent space within entities that have existing capabilities with it. One of the other things through the surveys that was really striking within Humboldt is that the generators actually really they vocalized a lot of care for wanting to know how much they were donating, which is amazing because it shows that they're not thinking just about compliance. They want to understand their participation better. So what you'll notice within the report is one of our strategies is to ensure that we're rolling out more scales and more training to all the volunteers within the nonprofits so that we can measure at the point of collection and then make those numbers that I presented earlier a little bit more robust. Because as we can track things better, we can improve the health and safety of donation more. That's when we can really start gaining traction on the value for your dollar of investment within food recovery, because we can start really seeing how this program is making meals to feed people in a safe way. So I just wanted to add to that. So regarding our next steps, we're very excited to be here. We know that this has been a pretty brief presentation on what is a very dense report. It has already been presented to the LTF. Like I said, we've got some great feedback. We were able to roll through a lot of questions there. But Mike and I are very passionate about food recovery and wanting to see a very new standard regarding food recovery and participation from different jurisdictions and the roles of all of the stakeholders involved with food recovery, whether it's a doctor who's helping a patient who's dealing with food insecurity, or it's a nonprofit who's struggling that needs to do more. They just need to be lifted up a little bit. So we're here to take questions. We're here to, seek any feedback on the report, make adjustments, and hopefully set Humboldt on a path to expand the current program. And I'll apologize for the background noise. I texted my sitter, get the kids out, because it was too noisy. So.
No problem. Thank you both for the presentation. We'll open it up first for questions from the board or from the LTF, and then we'll open it up for the public, and then come back for any additional comments. So probably it's easiest if you can use the emblem to raise your hand, just because there's so many people here, it's hard to see them on the screen. But if you can't, and I don't call on you, feel free to say something. Any questions? I have a question. Well, maybe everyone's thinking. And my question is, a lot of this overlaps. I've been to several presentations by the North Coast Growers Association and the Food Policy Council. And a lot of this actually overlaps with some of their goals in terms of cold storage, transportation of foods, and just food security in general. Have you had conversations with them about possible collaboration or done listening sessions or anything with them?
So I think sorry, Mike, take it.
Sorry, I'm sorry. That's a great question. We actually work nationally in combining all these resources. So every organization in every area that has a resource that we require for this is a valued partner. And to your point, the only way we get there is when we align with those other organizations or other stakeholders. That's what makes it work. That's what makes it affordable and effective. So you're absolutely right. We engage every day with multiple stakeholders all around the country.
And I think certainly one of the next steps, and we've received this feedback in other regions where we've participated, is because of the way that the report approaches from 1383 first, and then we try and bring in a lot of collaborations. It can be used as an asset to other organizations that are working on regional programs. So within the report, as I mentioned, we surveyed all the nonprofits, and I'm sure there's several nonprofits that are working within those regional groups. I don't believe we haven't presented this report or findings to that group specifically, but it's certainly something that would be vital and important, because we need those voices to ensure that we're not missing programs, or we can better really expand programs that they're already working on. So as an example, I'm a Balanced biggest fan. One of the things that they were able to do in the city of Orange is align programs with their HUD grants to help combat homelessness. So it wasn't until we started having conversations with the city of Orange and looking at their strategic plan for homelessness that we were able to start partnering 1383 compliance and seek those homelessness grants that also then helped comply with 1383 into a mutually beneficial program. Because right now, when it comes to food insecurity, there's a lot of groups doing a lot of things. And what we promote is a regional approach to bring everything together, because that's how we're going to be most successful. So it's a phenomenal question. And I think it's a great opportunity.
And I would just add to that question, there's one more segment that we have to rely on, and that is the healthcare side. There's a benefit to the healthcare industry. So we need to marry that environmental side of it with the food as a nutrition source component of it, because our money will go further and we'll have access to greater resources.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Robin Prasker.
Thank you. I'm here with the city of Eureka, and I just wanted to give some feedback saying I really enjoyed the capacity report. I thought it was exactly what we needed, and I'm excited to talk implementation because that's where mine goes, but I know we're not quite there yet. I did have two just little pieces of feedback that may or may not have already made it to you, but I think it might be helpful, if it's at all still possible, to with the generator spreadsheet to understand what type of business they were under the tier 1, tier 2 categories. that would just be helpful for us as we implement. And then I'm not sure if it was in the scope or not, but we had a great budget for what we need to do, but I didn't know if you guys had any recommendations of how to source funding or not. So those were my two things that I've been wondering about. Otherwise, again, it's been a pleasure working with you, and it was nice to do that workshop outside of this project as well. That went really well, and we're just grateful for your involvement. So thank you.
Well, we have certainly really enjoyed working in Humboldt County. I think it's you guys have a really unique county, and I think what that means for Mike and I is a great opportunity to expand something that we truly believe in. So I will say with sourcing funding, like that is where we are with every jurisdiction, because we've done this before, right? You have a capacity plan, you check the boxes for Cal Recycle. We dig a little deeper so that we can provide something that's useful, because that's the point, is to actually make a change. And then it comes down to funding and how do we make this happen. So that is certainly something I think we would love to help the region with. We have to sort of identify who's going to take the lead, how different stakeholders are going to talk together. We certainly would recommend at least beginning the discussions on a regional pathway, setting out a clear goal, right? So is your goal 1383 compliance, or is your goal to create something that's bigger that might, as Leslie pointed out, start bringing in other stakeholders to create something that's bigger than 1383? So you might guess Mike and I are always in favor of the second point, right? This is where the opportunity is, that this is a moment in time that we can change food insecurity and how we're talking and dealing with it. And there's a lot more opportunities when we start broadening the conversation, right? So that is something we've certainly had some lessons learned we'd love to share. We've certainly seen some pitfalls that we'd love to help you avoid. But that is absolutely part of the next conversation and how we get there. As far as the spreadsheet, I will follow up with Rachel. So I'll find out. Yeah.
Thank you. Frank Nelson with Recology, your hand's up next.
Hello, Frank Nelson with Recology, and thank you. A lot of folks already know me. I'm the operations manager for Linda Wise, and Linda Wise is unavailable. She has a scheduling conflict today, but Linda Wise is also the chair for the Greater Eureka Chamber of Commerce. And so she had some information that she wanted to have me share with folks tonight. Some pretty good information that came about from her last Friday meeting while she was wearing her chamber chair hat when she met two separate times with Senator McGuire and Assemblyman Woods. Some information that came up in relation to food capacity for SB 1383 came to light in their discussions, and that was that there are some creative funding mechanisms that are out there. One item came up was that our county and fishing industry potentially could need cold storage, as well as our food redistribution network. So, a parallel kind of came between the two when talking about what happened recently in Mendocino County. Now, Mendocino County had taken advantage of some fish and game funds that were available to build some refrigeration plants. So, one of kind of the conversation kind of proliferated into, could we perhaps utilize some funding and some large underutilized retail space like strip malls to go after some of that funding from Fish and Game that might help a partnership with our fishing industry and our needs with the SB 1383 food recovery. So I think that was something that kind of caught Linda's attention during her discussions that she really wanted to bring tonight to share, but again, she's unavailable. So on her behalf.
I mean, that sounds awesome, right?
I got to share with you that's great to hear, because we've always been advocates of identifying there are multiple revenue streams. We can't just look for one quick ATM machine to fund this. There's a lot of cost benefits in this program, and when we look at cost beneficiaries, we look at potential revenue streams. So I think it's in our best interest. To Linda's point, yes, let's go beat the bushes. Let's look for alternative ways. We just know one thing: we just can't live off of grants. Grants are basically happy hour food, and you can't survive on happy hour food. But there's other ways to find that nutrition source.
And continuing on with that, Linda did want to mention that what came out of the conversation is that there is a likelihood that there's going to be a decrease in the 23-24 budget that will provide funding mechanisms. So this may be a little bit more time sensitive if that was something that folks wanted to move on, kind of a glimpse into the future.
Thank you, Frank. And I apologize. I kind of accidentally merged public comment and board member comment. So I'm going to jump back over to the local task force. And I see Jennifer Weiss you have your hand up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Weiss with County of Humboldt Public Works. And I just wanted to add on to Robin's comment in that about the spreadsheet, I just wanted to make sure to communicate what I heard from the Department of Environmental Health for Humboldt County, who's going to be conducting the inspections for edible food recovery. And they also really would like to see on that spreadsheet the list of the type of business that or organization is it a supermarket? Is it a grocery store? Basically, so that they can know the effort that they're going to need to expand in planning for a successful program. And that's it. Thank you for such a really great job on this report, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Are there any other members of the LTF or the board of directors that have questions? And I'll go back to the public. Okay. Any members of the public or community partners that wish to bring forward questions or comments? Okay, I don't see any. I'll close that. There will be other chances, in the meeting, for folks to speak. Seeing that, I'll bring it back to the LTF and the board of directors for any other direction or anything that you wish to, or just thoughts remarks you might want to share. I think I just, again, with the pause, I'll just say, especially since that was Frank Wilson also brought that up. I think that with Recology that Frank Nelson, that there is a real opportunity here to, reach out to the Fisher People's Association, the Food Policy Council, the North Coast Growers Association. I mean, to me, the sooner we can start to make the kind of bridge those conversations and really talk about the food system as a whole, the better, because I do think a lot of these issues are kind of co-occurring, across the county, especially the cold storage and transportation is something. And I know the North Coast Growers Association is really looking to expand, the work they're doing with food and, really establishing, more opportunities for locally grown fresh food as well. I just want to acknowledge, Carly's here from Food for People. Like, thanks for all the work you're doing. Your Food for People comes up so many times throughout this whole report. So thank you for that. Any other comments before we move on to a short break?
If I could just add and give a shout out to all of you, because we've done this up and down the state, and in some jurisdictions, it's a box checking exercise that's going to come back to haunt that jurisdiction later on. You guys allowed us to do it the right way, to really kick over every stone. And the result will be an effective program that impacts people dramatically for generations. So thank you very much for allowing us to participate. Thank
you. I feel like we're moving pretty quickly, so maybe just a 5-minute break would be enough. Does anyone feel like they need a longer break? Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break, so we will return at 4:23 and see you all back here then. All right. Oh, there we go. All right, everyone, welcome back. It is 4:23, and we're just going to keep our meeting rolling right along. So we'll move on to item 7, which is the SB 1383 compliance item, organics and regional compliance services. And this will be presented by Evan Edgar from Edgar and Associates, who's been working with us throughout the process. And I will turn it over to you, Evan.
Thank you, Chair and board members, and Monica and Mike, and Eric and Jill. I'm Evan Edgar of Edgar Associates. We kicked off this project in early 2022, and that's when the 1383 programs were supposed to start. And Eric just wanted me to give a verbal update. You guys have all the documents. I'm going to keep it simple without any PowerPoints, just a nice verbal update. So we're late to the game, and we've been playing catch up ever since. And the goal the whole time was to get in compliance, avoid fines, and keep the organics within Humboldt County. So SB 1383 is on the jurisdictions. It's not on the agency, but as we look at this, we want a regional and consistent report, such as what's going on with the regional climate action plan that is happening now. And a lot of what I read in the Humboldt Regional Climate Action Plan is basically embeds all the 1383 programs, because 1383 is just not another Wesley Chesborough recycling law. It's a climate change law, and Wesley did a lot, he's in 2014, he passed AB 1826, which was mandatory organic recycling, but it was under the old AB 939 construct without any enforcement. So statewide, a lot of folks have started mandatory organic collection. In Humboldt County, that did not happen. So we have more catch up to do. Ironically, ever since that law was put into place in 2014, statewide, 1 million more tons of food waste went into the landfill by 2020. So 1823 didn't really work. But with 1383 being a climate change law, and with mandates and enforcement, it's a real deal. It's starting now. And from the very beginning, I've been driving the roadmap as it was being prepared. The roadmap was kind of writing itself in real time and became a living document. So February had all the local government grants for Blue Lake, Ferndale, Fortuna, and Trinidad, and the county got a total of $172,000. And they had to adopt the model ordinance, which we helped out on. We determined the low density and low population areas where they have collection deferred up to 5 years, but they had to do everything else other than collection. By March, we applied for SB 619. We bought a year along the way if you want to do a notice of intent, and that was accepted by CalRecycle. And by April, we're filing initial jurisdictional compliance reports with adopted ordinances. So we're meeting with all members, and we're implementing the roadmap as we're developing it. With regards to capacity planning within a roadmap, we supported backyard composting, both rural and urban, and how to do it and how to put that in a model ordinance. We supported all the community composting. We've been engaged with CalRecycle grants with 3 local facilities where they get up about $30,000 in grants to do their programs. We reviewed all local permits with site visits, reviewed all transfer stations with site visits. We determined additional capacity was needed within the county. We reviewed out-of-county permitted food waste facilities with site visits, but we put the cart before the horse. And so we started with a facility, and we really didn't have the collection yet, because in order to drive collection, you got to have a facility and a permitted compost facility in order to determine what type of organics program you wanted. So it's kind of reverse engineering, but it was something we had to do to look at local permitted capacity. What we recommended, and that went to the board, was to repurpose the Hawthorne Street Solid Waste Facilities Permit, the recycling center, to have it organic waste processing to achieve 1383 compliance. That would be a substantial effort to avoid any fines. So, with SB 619, programs could start as late as 2023. And so we wanted to make sure that you had capacity in the short term. And to have that, it was critical to repurpose Hawthorne Street Solid Waste Facilities Permit. We met with the local LEA. I see Sarah Sanders online there. We walked through the facility, and it could be up to a 6-month permit revision or a 30-day permit update, but it will be done quite efficiently. Otherwise, based upon statewide knowledge, it would take about 3 to 5 years to permit a new facility, a new transfer station, composting. Yesterday in Yolo County, I was a senior engineer back in 1991. I got an EIR for a compost facility. Yesterday was a grand opening, 31 years later. And down in Ventura County, I started in 2009, and we have a permit in from the Cower Cycle 12 years later. So it takes a while to do these permits based upon experience, but we could get into 3 to 5 years. But to wait to permit a new facility, we would get into penalties, and that would not be a substantial effort, and the Cower Cycle would have fines. And once a facility becomes operational to transfer the permitted food waste, the collection, we want to match the collection effort to match the transfer station to whoever permitted compost facility it went to. And currently, the food waste is being transferred out of state to Oregon as part of your MSW. So we want to keep it in county sooner than later. So the recommendation, we had a different criteria and conditions for RFP to transfer food waste out of county for a short period. Another goal was to keep clean green waste in a county and develop agricultural compost operations, and we recommended that within the roadmap. Since then, we have met with some dairy farmers down in the Ferndale area that are poised in order to host the agricultural compost facility and sequester compost. And that sequestering compost is called regenerative agriculture. And that's a key point of your regional climate action plan in order to make a robust local economy, was to keep that clean green out there to sequester water, to have better yields. The ranchers love it. Statewide, my firm is working on different carbon projects in Sacramento, Ventura, Merced, and the cattle people love it. So working with the local ranchers and working with West Green, he wants to partner up in order to take the heat off his facility. Right now, it's taken about 18,000 tons a year from the authority, and we got another 12,000 tons a year of green waste. And that would be quite an impact. So by chipping and grinding at his facility, he has a contract extended along the way. So we're kind of having a living document. When Western got a tip fee increase because of the grinding capacity and diesel and hauling, he's looking at working on taking the green waste down to Ferndale to compost it. And that's a great plan. I'll be up there on Monday meeting with the ranchers to work on the permit. So I'd be working with Sarah Sanders to give you a EA notification tier sooner than later in order to get that going. For food waste capacity, the agency heard from AgGrid, and that is they're permitting a co-digestion dairy digester at the Miranda Dairy in Ferndale area, and they say it will be ready to go in the second quarter of 2014. Now, AgGrid is very credible. They have facilities back east. They have money behind them. Dairy digesters in California are a big winner. They're cost effective, big methane reduction. So you take the manures from the dairy coupled with the organic slurry that you get out of food waste. So at the Hawthorne station, there'll be a food waste processing machine called the Scots. So all the commercial waste would come in. About a third of it is residual. Plastics, cardboard, forks and corks. So that gets screened out, and the remaining is organic slurry. As part of this technology, they added on a polishing system so we get rid of microplastics. The last thing we want to do is put microplastics out in the community. So it's a very great piece of machine to make organic slurry. And just so happens we have a really neat, elegant harmonic fit. But what I mean by that is that based upon the 75% diversion by 2025, we're looking at about 100 tons a day of commercial organic waste. Just so happens down at AgGrid in the Ferndale area, they need 100 tons a day of food waste for co-digestion. So when we take manures and food waste, it really kicks up the biomethane, and the biomethane then is treated on site with combined heat and power and makes energy. So it's a carbon neutral dairy. And then with regards to the digestate, they would digest it, would be composted, and then be used on the local lands around there. So it's a great program, but it won't be ready till the second quarter of 2024. So at Hawthorne Street, what would need to happen is about $1 million for food waste processing equipment to make a pumpable organic slurry free of microplastics, which could be easily permitted within a 30-day time window or up to 6 months. All depends what the LEA says. So the goal is keeping organics in county. The roadmap has it, and we're kind of implementing it as we go. So we're driving the roadmap to keep organics in Humboldt County. Now, on the collection side, that needs to mate with a processing facility. Like I said, we put the cart before the horse, but we have a 3-cart system, which is a preferred system from CalRecycle, easy compliance, easy to check the boxes, better than a 1-cart dirty system. So you guys pick the right system, what you're recommending, and keeps the commodities clean. So that's good news. But as part of that, with all the different communities, you want a regional and consistent message on what types of organic waste can be collected and what cannot through outreach and education. Some facilities out there are organically certified, and they want to keep their organic certification. I mentioned 9 different food waste compost facilities that could be open for RFP if you were to transfer down Highway 101, and they are organically certified. They want to keep it. So they want to not have some types of packaging or bioplastics or things that shouldn't be compostable anyway. We don't want any greenwashing of dumping on the green bin like we have for wishful recycling. Everybody was dumping it on a blue cart, and that didn't work out. We just want to make sure we have a clean feedstock that can be compostable. Other compost facilities are bulk composters, so they have more leeway. They're not certified organic. So when you go out to bid on RFP, depending on what facility is chosen, it kind of depends on what type of feedstocks can be put in a green cart. So that's under discussion. Another discussion we had was that, statewide, the haulers have a supply chain issue. It could be 12 to 18 months to get, the trucks and the carts, and that's recognized. So we got to be aware of that. But we did mention that there could be a possible phase-in collection program in the urban core areas. It's under discussion. We didn't have too much input on that yet. So that's a good discussion to have, that when Hawthorne Street's permitted, and should you put a transfer station in, and should the RFP go out, then we need to talk about how soon do you want to have collection, not a pilot program, but a phase in for the urban core, the restaurants in the downtown areas. So I've been meeting with the haulers to discuss that. For procurement, big issue. Everybody's got to do it. There's no waiver for that. The governor signed a bill last week, AB 1985. And what it does, it phases in procurement. So you only need to do 35% of your target in 2023, 65% in 2024, and 100% by 2025. Within the roadmap, I determined the targets, how much you need to meet for each jurisdiction. Last week, I sent out an email to the LTF as well about AB 1985, what it meant, and the phase-in targets. We determined, you have the flexibility to do compost, mulch, bioenergy, and RNG, renewable natural gas. Since then, CalRecycle has approved a model that allows the cities to broker compost to agriculture. That's going on in Sonoma County. So should there be a burden upon the cities to use it at your parks and rec, or use it as mulch along your roadside, there is a good model that's being approved that the cities could broker it out to agriculture. And that's one of the biggest features of the Regional Climate Action Plan, is just sequester carbon into the soil. Up in Sacramento, the California Air Resources Control Board has a scoping plan. Every 5 years, they do a new scoping plan for the implement AB 32, get 40% less greenhouse gases by 2030. This is the first year they had the feature of natural working lands to take compost and biochar to the working lands of California, to agriculture, because it is a bigger carbon sink than the trees. Everybody thinks a forest is a great carbon sink, and it is. The soil is a great carbon sink. The problem we've been treating their soil like dirt for too long, and we're losing organic matter. And so by putting the carbon back in the soil is a winner, and will implement your climate action plan. Under task 5 was a waste management structure. And what I'm seeing statewide, different reports are put out by different cities. The city of Salinas had 100 different jurisdictions and different reports, but we're seeing fee increases, about 20% fee increase on a residential bill and about 30% on a commercial statewide average. That's statewide. So over by 2025, the bill could go 20% in residential and 30% on commercial. This task 5, we deferred it until the RFP for the food waste transfer was awarded to determine the cost impacts. And the resources from task 5 was repurposed for the earlier tasks that we had to do to get into compliance quickly, to get the local government grants, get the ordinances in place, file for the extension. So we kind of, working with the executive director at the time, we repurposed task 5 to load up task 1 and 2 to get in compliance immediately, since we were, late to the game. The agreement between the authority and Edgar Associates was anticipated to be renewed annually for up to 3 years at the discretion and approval of the board. And the service today have placed Humboldt County in a strategic position to offer their jurisdictions 1383 compliance, have kept your member agencies in compliance with 1383, utilizing this compliance roadmap. So in summary, we are driving the roadmap as it was being prepared to stay in compliance. I had 14 trips up there on my own time to meet with the jurisdictions, operators, the haulers, the farmers, and Cal Poly to achieve timely compliance in a cost-effective manner. That's a roadmap. I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Edgar. Are there any questions from members of the LTF or the Board of Directors? I think I had a question. For when you're speaking, just like more a point of clarification, I think when you're speaking to AB 1985, you're saying kind of 30% by 2023, 60% by 2024. So, just hypothetically speaking, is that something like the city of Eureka could be sort of a pilot project in 2023, and that would get us to 30% or something? Is that what you're meaning by that 30%?
It's more a phase-in. During this bill, it was sponsored by Assemblyman Rivas that you heard from the League of Cities. As a whole, it was supposed to start in 2022, 100%, and January 1st for everybody, regardless of size or population density. And then we kicked out to 2023 with SB 619 last year. So, and that's a big burden, started in 2023 due to all this procurement, and a lot had to do with COVID and the pandemic for delay there as well. But they look at more of a phase-in than a pilot, a phase-in that you don't have to meet the 100% the goal in 2025. You only have to be, less than a third of the compost, mulch, or bioenergy. And then by 2025, about 2/3, 65%. So it's phased in. So you can start, brokering compost is the easiest one. In the case of the county, I worked with Jennifer Weiss and the bioenergy from the wood chips going into the bioenergy plant and having it purchased by your community choice aggregation by the authority up there. That's a qualifying to be bioenergy that is sold back to the city is a qualifying organic procurement. RNG, renewable natural gas, is not really functional up there, so that's off the table. But you still have mulches for roadway side erosion control and compost that you can broker to agriculture or use on your parks and rec.
Thank you. I see Jennifer Weiss has their hand up.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Leslie, I think the AB 1985 is just referring to procurement phase-in. So for the jurisdictions to have some additional time to meet those procurement targets, but that's what it addresses, just the procurement. I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you. Yeah, not collection, only procurement. Thank you.
Thank you. That helps. I appreciate that. Let's see. Any other? Merritt Perry.
Evan, this is kind of a question for Evan, and I kind of know the answer, but one of the things, Evan, I wondered if you could just comment on this. When you came into this project in your proposal, you gave us a pretty specific idea of what you would be doing. And the product of the roadmap is very consistent with that original roadmap. One of the things is we didn't see a big exploration of alternatives. You know, I'm pleased as an engineer who in the past has come up with projects and, you know, try to figure out what the answer is right away. But I was wondering if you could characterize, you know, kind of how you went about it. You know, we're looking at a few specific examples right now of a digester at the Miranda Dairy or potentially something else that could come in. I mean, you've identified what you see as the most, you know, kind of expedient pathway and efficient, but I wondered if you wanted to just kind of discuss why we didn't look at more alternatives, or, you know, how you got to the point where you had a pretty high level of certainty for the roadmap that you presented.
Oh, thank you, Merritt. Yeah, first I looked at all the current transfer stations that permitted. I went up to Humboldt Sanitation, met with Tasha, walked her site. Was she interested in doing stuff there with regards to food processing or transfer or composting? And they were not, you know, they weren't really suited to do that, but I met her twice, and both times they weren't ready to take on a 1383 compost or food waste processing program. I went down to Fortuna, met with Linda Weiss at Eel River Transfer. She had a baler building that was possible. They could be repurposed into food waste processing to make slurry there. For a while there, I didn't know Hawthorne, you know, was available, and that was on a fence regarding the Eureka Recycling Center. I don't know that was going to happen as a primary choice. We had backup with Eel River, and then we had Humboldt. So those only currently permitted facilities. I did get a zoning map from Tom Matson at the county out on the peninsula. There's a whole ring of neat things going on out there with regards to Nordic, Recology's out there, the Fairhaven biomass plant that is being repurposed and looked at. And out there's some pad areas. So there's potential if the county wanted to do a compost facility. There's some good zoning out there. It's in coastal, so it has its problems, but that was a potential. But I also know being a coastal zone will take 3 to 5 years. And then to wait that long, it wasn't expedient. So you're right, Merritt, that I went with a quick reverse engineering answer that made sense by optimizing your current permitted capacity. I also met with Wes Green and all the composters out there from Freedom Dynamics. Omar from my staff, he's on a call here today as well. We went around and we met with all the community composters if they want to get bigger and they were contained. We went by the wastewater treatment plants before, and you know, biosolids is different than food waste and green waste. And you guys looked at anaerobic digestion back in 2012. So I looked at the older reports that happened back when the agency looked at anaerobic digestion and had a pilot program. I dug those reports out, asked the AD folks if they want to take the slurry to anaerobic digestion at the wastewater plants, and nobody wanted to pick at that scab. It was pushed hard last time, and I didn't want to push hard this time on it. So I learned a few lessons up there. Those are the key things I looked at, Merritt, going up there and talking to everybody. Those are my alternative analysis.
Well, I just, you know, I think it's good to point out, you know, that, you know, kind of how you got to the solution, and that you did explore a number of alternatives. You know, I think one of the primary ones was the tipping floor and having the permitted space at the Hawthorne Street transfer station was a big one. You know, but there are other options. They would take longer and likely be something that would have to develop through an RFP by a private party, or perhaps a JPA and developed by government. But right now, really, you were looking at how can we get into compliance, you know, in the most quickest, most efficient way.
So true, Merritt, because we started late in 2022. If we started 4 years ago, it would have been a different study, different conversation. We had more time to phase it in. But one of the goals we had was get in compliance, stay out of fines, and keep organics in county. So that was the three criteria that we were looking at when we were doing our assessment.
So if any of these, you know, whether it be the tipping location or whether it be, you know, the processing for the, you know, like the anaerobic digestion or how you break it down, or even where you place it, there could be a fallback for any of those if what's in the roadmap presented really, or, you know, what's been presented as the, I guess, preferred alternative. If those don't pan out, there's alternatives to each, but each one's going to take time and, you know, may cost more because there's just no capacity there. So you really leaned on areas where that capacity exists or is already being developed.
Correct. And Linda Weiss is not on the phone, but we did walk that her, she's ready for a plan B. We looked at plan A was Hawthorne, plan B, and those are the only real options in front of us other than taking a 2 to 3, 4 year period to get a new solid waste facilities permit, which takes a lot of time and resources.
For a tipping floor.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And for a composting facility or a digester, there's other options, but you like the Miranda Dairy because that's already in the permitting process.
And plus, they're a very credible firm. I see a lot of technologies come to California, a lot of black boxes. And what I saw here, there's a very credible firm. Went to the homepage. They've been up there a few times. They know how to get things done. It's nearby. But the criteria on that one is that the Hawthorne Street would have to put in what you call a food waste processing, a depackager, to kind of get all the contamination out of the commercial food waste and have a slurry that's pumpable. And at the Miranda Dairy, they're starting a permitting process, and they don't want to get a solid waste facilities permit. They don't want to get in the garbage business. So by having the solid waste permit where it's at, and by having a pumpable slurry without microplastics going in the dairy co-digestion, it's an easier, different permit that they can get. And I got to hand it to the dairy industry statewide. They are the most cost-effective, carbon-negative fuel. They're performance-driven, and they have a really good program in California. So I believe in dairy digesters.
Okay, and just sorry, one last follow-up, if Chair Castellano, if you permit one more follow-up. One of the concerns that we've heard lately is that HWMA, the process just for converting that tipping floor, it could be a significant effort of time and money, right? But the original intention was that that could be done again under the existing permit. The other recycling facility could be relocated in an area that doesn't have the same stringent permitting requirements that an organic waste tipping floor would have. But again, there might be more effort than is indicated in the initial roadmap, but that it still would be less than what some of the alternatives would present.
And it would be expensive to repurpose the floor. I know Eric's done a lot of good work on that. And then new addition, I just got a recent cost estimate with new pricing for having a food waste processor with today's pricing and an organic poultry system to get rid of microplastics is just under $1 million. So that is the expense on a couple of the repurposing. But it's a walking the floor with the LEA and been around a lot of facility is ideal facility. It's 4 bays. A lot of safety, 1 bay for sulfol, 1 bay for residential food waste, 1 bay for commercial food waste, and 1 bay for off-taking and food waste processing. So, and each side of the load out, it is an ideal facility that is could be permit ready as soon as 30 days or as long as 6 months, depending on how CowerCycle wants to treat the permit with Sarah Sanders.
Right. You say 30 days for the permit, but you'd still have the equipment, the reconfiguration, the budgeting for that project, the relocation of the recycling facilities if they wish to do so. So there's a lot, it could be pretty quick, but again, there's a budget that needs to be developed, probably, proposals for construction work. And so the timeline, even though the permitting timeline is short, there could be a significant effort to do that work at the facility.
Exactly. That's so true. And what is called a substantial effort to avoid fines. We had a conversation on that about 3 or 4 board meetings ago. A substantial effort is that we want to be collection and processing as soon as 2023, but no later than 2024. So I think the latest that any program, state of California, can go on collection and processing would be January 1st, 2024, as long as you're making a substantial effort. And the authority is doing that by repurposing the Hawthorne Street transfer station. If that did not happen, it would have to go to Plan B at Eagle River or site a new facility. That could take 2 to 3 to 4 years, and then you fall out of that substantial effort, and then you have the threats of fines when enforcement starts in 2024.
So to translate, really, that keeps us out of regulatory hot water by choosing a direction and moving towards it continuously.
Exactly. And that's the goal of the roadmap, is stay in compliance, cost effective, and keep stuff in county. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to hand it over to Vice Chair Hogan, and it looks like there's some hands up. And thanks, everyone. I'll see you soon.
Great. Thanks, Leslie. Robin, go ahead. You have your hand up. Thank you. Oh, I lost myself. Oh, there I am. I bumped my tile. So I just wanted to make sure I understand how it works from collection to composting. I think I understand it, but I think it just might help to recap it. So if we had a facility in the county that could do commercial compost, Recology could potentially drive the trucks up to that facility, drop the organics if they accept it in that way. But that's a moot point right now because we don't have a compost facility in the county. So therefore, we need a pre-processing tip floor for the collection trucks to drop the material so that then they can be transported to a facility that can do the composting. Is that correct, Evan?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Robin, one comment, but initially it could be out of town until those capabilities could be developed locally at the Miranda area or elsewhere.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thanks. I was just curious, Evan, can you definitively say that the Miranda Dairy Digester would be a long-term solution for accepting all of the county's food waste? I mean, does it have that type of capacity?
Yes, it does. Usually these dairy digesters on a 20-year capital recovery and all the financing. So, for them to get financing, they're going to have to, go out to, get a contract. So they would very interested in answering any RFP that the authority would have put out to be a player in getting that commercial food waste. And they told me they need 100 tons a day of commercial slurry. And it so happens the design tonnage to meet the 75% of the food waste recovery is about 100 tons. So it's a good harmonic fit, and they would be designed for up to 20 years of capacity.
So you're saying 100 tons is what we would be providing? That's the estimate?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are there any other? Our next agenda item is a general discussion and wrap up. So I feel like we're kind of moving in that direction already. Are there any more specific comments for Edgar and Associates? Yeah, Frank, go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure I got my comment in during public comment. Sorry if I cut anybody off on the last one. Just a few more things that just kind of jumping in and speaking for Linda Wise, again, Frank Nelson, operations manager for the record. So with Recology. So Linda did take some time when she was at that same meeting with Senator McGuire and Assemblyman Woods she took advantage of the time to talk about SB 1383 regional challenges that jurisdictions are facing in regard to, compliance and timeline. Specifically discussing the supply chain of trucks as a contributing factor. I think that caught us all of us off guard with the vehicle delays this year with chips and manufacturing. She told them that one thing that AB 619 helped a lot with extending deadlines for things out to 2023. They talked about the necessity of an extension that jurisdictions, such as everyone on the call today, if an extension is necessary, the urge was to write and ask. So also noting there have been recent extensions, and this came up in our own organization in relation to California CARB laws. So California CARB laws have been put in place to essentially work equipment out of the system that are, leading to emissions issues. And there have been some delays in laws that have allowed us to delay the purchase or replacement of existing vehicles that have been earmarked for replacement if we have vehicles in the pipeline. So that was a pretty hard stance that had happened up until recently, and it had driven a lot of our replacements as a corporation. But now there's some understanding that there are supply chain issues, there are issues getting replacements. And so, California has decided that it was a good idea to go ahead and let us delay the replacement of some vehicles as long as we had another one in the pipeline. With these kind of laws and delays, it's easy to draw a parallel between California CARB and SB 1383, especially when talking to representatives. I mean, like perhaps allowing or asking for allowances if maybe there's a signed franchise agreement, say for instance by 2023, January 2023. Maybe we could delay compliance in SB 1383 until the trucks show up 24 months later. So there's still the existing delay in getting trucks. I think we're all aware of that. But I think that there's been a real observance of how it's caused a hiccup in implementation for this law. And I think that the folks at the legislature have been pretty open to understanding that. And so far, even in our industry, our side of the industry, they've really acknowledged that and said, we're gonna take what you've done and say that it's a good faith effort, and you have vehicles in the pipeline, and we're going to go ahead and let you extend things out for replacements, in accordance with the California CARB laws. So, with the proper coordination and, reaching out to representatives, there could be some more flexibility in getting extensions. So I think that was something really good to know. And lastly, as representatives of Recology, talking about SB 1383 action items, it's important that the communication be consistent and collaborative to the users of the system now and in the future. If everyone can work regionally on that effort, it would meet our goals with the least amount of costs. And I think Evan Edgar touched on the need for collaborative regional communication, because we're bringing this material to one point, whether we're making a slurry product out of it, or whether we're making a bale out of it, it's going to go to another point where it's going to be reused. And if that material and that communication isn't correct and that material isn't correct, it's going to just push the problem right down the line to the point to where we're pushing a contaminated product down the line from the point of collection. So we want to get out there and put a really good communication plan in place right up front. And so that way, no matter where you move in the community, we all stay kind of local in Humboldt. You go from one city to the next, if you're moving, that you see the same communication and you know what the rules are pertaining to your 3-can system. So thanks.
Yeah, Frank, you made a lot of good points about fleets. Right now the advanced clean fleet rules, what you're talking about at CARB, they're pushing towards electrification phased in starting 2024, and that's going to be a big lift. A lot of haulers statewide are pre-buying now all their diesel, clean diesel, and using renewable diesel. It's been a strategy to get things in a pipeline. So people who are ordering now are 12 to 18 months out, and you got a cleaner diesel engine with an alternative fuel, renewable fuel, about 40 to 60%. So a lot of haulers are doing that right now. They don't have to wait till next year to buy, because the longer you wait, you have to buy more electric. So people are stacking their fleet up now with new trucks, so they don't have to go all electric sooner than later. And CARB is tough. We lobby CARB all the time in order to keep our CNG vehicles in play. We don't want to go all electric because it's twice the duty cycle and twice as expensive. We don't have a reliable grid. So you're right about the CARB issue. One big thing going on right now in Sacramento is called the Little Hoover Commission. And the Little Hoover Commission has been around since 1960. It's about good government. And what Frank said, cost-effective government. And they've been holding hearings throughout the state on 1383, throughout LA, the state capitol. They have different industry members. Local government was up there. RCRC, Stacy Heaton, did a really good job for the rural counties about the challenges of doing this program out there. And that's why the rural's got a 5-year delay on collection. And then we got the phase in for procurement. So I think that 1383 will not be rolled back. I think the governor wouldn't veto it. It's a climate change bill, but people are listening to how to how to work it. It'll be cleanup legislation to phase it in and get some more flexibility. But the tenets of 1383 will not go away. It's here to stay, and the fines will not go away. And there's a goal to get a 40% reduction of methane by 2030. So yeah, there's a lot of movement. So a lot of people are talking in Sacramento about 1383, and the Little Hoover Commission hasn't looked at this issue or at the waste boards for 15 years. So this is the first time they're back looking at Cow Recycle and how 1383 works. From there will be a lot of recommendations, a lot from the League of Cities, a lot from the RCRC, and those recommendations will be posted up by the end of the year. And then starting 2023, that will be used for legislation issues to seek what Frank's talking about, some flexibility, some modifications, but not a wholesale change out.
Thank you for that response, Evan. Frank, was your hand still up? Did you have anything else? No. Okay, great. Emily, I see you. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Emily Benby, City of Arcata. So I'm trying to think of how to be most succinct here. First, thank you, Edgar and Associates, for all the good work you did. Really has been helpful in laying out the roadmap. And I want to take a step back and allude to what I believe Eric said at the beginning of the meeting, which was the intent of this roadmap and a lot of Edgar's work was to help us as a region identify what our options might be and, help inform future collaborative efforts. And Evan spoke quite a bit about some of the alternatives that he went through in coming up with potential pathways for our achieving compliance that Merritt had asked some questions about. The short term being that out of county hauling with the in-county processing, the long term potentially being to develop an in-county facility. And subsequent to that, or somewhat concurrent with that, I should say, the HWMA board authorized the closure of the Eureka Recycling Center to head toward that direction. I wanted to highlight at this juncture, and I don't want to get us too far off topic, but while we're all in the same room, I really did want to bring up the importance, I think, of I guess I'll use the term formalizing that direction. We have all been working as a regionally de facto quite well over the last year, and it seems like we're all wanting to continue to move forward in working together as a region. And I realize that we might be needing some additional steps to formalize that regional relationship, knowing that this organics waste stream is a new waste stream that we have a framework to work from, but I don't know that we have the specific mechanism to flow through for that processing of organics. And so I just wanted to bring that up now. I don't know that we need to talk about the specific mechanism today, or if that's even, consistent with our specific agenda, but I do think it's important that we have those discussions in the near term, especially as 2023 is really looming in the very near term future. And these things, as quickly as they can happen, they'll still take time, and wanting to make sure that we're moving forward expediently, whether that's through additional LTF action, HWMA action, joint study sessions. So just wanting to float that with this group now as we're kind of heading out of this roadmap effort and into more implementation, making sure that we take the appropriate next steps necessary for that implementation.
Thank you, Emily. Those are really, really good points that we definitely need to think about as a group, how to work through a plan for implementation and how to move forward together. Merritt, go ahead.
Yeah, just a brief comment. Actually, it follows Emily's comment very well. I just wanted to indicate, Fortuna as not a HWMA member, it doesn't make sense for all of us to do this independently. Fortuna supports the regional effort. We want to be a participant. We want to cost share. We want to share deliverables. We participated in, the development of this roadmap. And so it makes sense for us to do that, as Evan said and Emily alluded to. And I think we need to figure out the steps of, hey, how do we pay for these things? How do we organize this new effort and waste stream? But Fortuna's on board. Do we work regionally? Because if we all take this, it's impossible to take on independently. And if we did, we'd all be doing the same thing and it'd be redundant. So I just wanted to kind of make that clear to the HWMA board that, you know, Fortuna wants to participate in a larger regional effort.
Great, thank you, Merritt. Emily, did your hand go back up? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
It did. Thank you. I left out one key detail that I meant to bring up in what I just said, which is, you know, while it's important that we move forward as a region timely so that we can come into compliance by that 2023 deadline, what I did not specifically mention that I really want to mention is that CalRecycle is meeting with the jurisdictions. Different representatives of CalRecycle through their compliance unit are meeting with the jurisdictions to develop compliance action plans, which basically means that they are starting to initiate that compliance effort, and we are being held to those compliance action plans. It's not to say that they aren't iterative and CalRecycle is not willing to work with us. I do believe that they are, but they are requiring compliance, you know, firmly at this juncture. So I just wanted to share that as a call for expediency, or at least to urge the importance of my pre-stated call for expediency. Thank you.
And Emily, I can build upon that. What they're doing at CalRecycle statewide, they're not picking on Humboldt County or anybody, is that they're looking at the 1826 program, that Chesbrough law, to phase in 1826. And that's under the old AB 939 construct. And they're looking at AB 341, another Chesbrough bill, to phase in mandatory collection that was been on the books for a while. So they're looking back during that era. And the reason they're doing so is to nudge people towards 1383 compliance. So they're not looking at 1383 yet. That won't start till 2024, but they are making the rounds on 1826 and 341 to make sure that they are a formalized step compliance program. And that's under the good faith effort law. When you pivot towards 1383 in 2024, it's no longer a good faith effort. It's called a substantial effort with fines and penalties. So it's a little higher bar to reach when you go from 1826 to 1383.
Thanks, Evan. Robin, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question for Eric, if it feels appropriate. Entertaining Emily's suggestion, I recognize we still have the October HWA board meeting to formally receive these final documents and a lot of other housekeeping to do, but should the members in HWA be interested in amending any agreements regarding organics, what might that process look like? So we just understand what to expect if we do go through that. Is that something appropriate to ask right now, or would we prefer to table that?
I can give you just a brief thing. The big linchpin is going to be dedication of tonnage. So in order for HWMA and my recommendation to the board to approve or move forward with anything, we would need to solidify organics tonnage to ensure that we can make necessary retrofits and planning for that tonnage. So obviously, as you guys know, the JPA only gives us flow control of municipal solid waste. There could be a conversation that's had with HWMA and its member agencies amending the current JPA to allow HWMA flow control of organic waste or waste outside of the MSW. Some more conversations would need to be had on how that's going to affect non-member agencies. That would get into the waste management fee structure, how we're going to assess those fees to member agencies, non-member agencies, self-haulers. But the real gist of it is a guarantee of tonnage to ensure that the capital that HWMA and the board would be putting forward to make alterations, changes, site improvements, that we would be speccing not only the operation, but that infrastructure would be used for X tonnage for X amount of time. Does that answer a little bit of that, Robin?
Yes, and then am I correct that if there was an amended agreement, that would go to each member's voting bodies and then to you for a final vote?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
General Counsel Diamond, did you have something to expand on that?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Yeah, you did a great job summarizing next steps. But what might be useful as the member agencies think about committing the tonnage, which is absolutely critical, is going to your own councils and board and getting that commitment now or sooner than later, so that can be incorporated into whatever framework is deemed best. And Eric, please feel free to elaborate on that if you had some other thoughts.
No, I think that's the general gist, unless Director Duffy had anything extra to add. So no, Robin, as long as that answered some of the questions you had, okay.
Tom, go ahead. I see your hand up.
So just a couple of comments. Our compliance meeting with Cal Recycle was specifically on 1383, nothing about 1826 or anything else. It was all 1383. They basically told us our 2025 plan for having trucks as provided by Recology was unacceptable. And then when you talk about the document that we all need, should there be a separate document because Fortuna wants to and should be involved in this? And if we're just amending the member agency document, they're going to be left out in the cold. And how do we work that? Is that a side agreement, or is there just a separate organic waste agreement? And I let you know that I did put flow control in our ordinance that got adopted, so the county officially has flow control, and we will be sending the food waste to you as part of the group effort if we all continue together.
Can I ask, Tom, was that flow control to HWMA?
No, it gives the county flow control.
Over all of the unincorporated area?
Yep.
Is that
over everything in the unincorporated area? So we can direct. And I don't imagine the county is going to do anything but direct it to HWMA as a regional approach.
Do you want me to address the other comment about the non-member agencies? My thoughts off the top of my head. I absolutely agree that there could be a countywide all agency agreement that is entertained. That we do have this structural problem of HWMA only having representation of all but two of the agencies, and so eventually I think there would probably need to be a JPA amendment that either acknowledges the ability of the board to bring in the non-member agencies, or for the member agencies to think about some limited participation. The non-member agencies to think about some limited participation in the JPA itself. Those are big conversations and probably not going to be solved tonight.
Go ahead, Merritt.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments, Eric, Nancy. It'd be, I'm glad that Tom included flow control in the county ordinance, and, we're willing to have those conversations. We think it makes sense, and we're willing to work on a staff level to figure out what agreements or amendments to the JPA or, whatever form that takes. But I'll need something to go back to the council to react to, and we're willing to put the time into developing those along with HWMA.
Yeah, and I think to General Counsel Diamond's point, it's obviously not something that we're going to come to an agreement or a direction at this exact meeting, but this is really what this was for, to take the pulse of not only HWMA board members, but LTF members on not only the reports, but talking about possible next steps to give everybody some direction as we move forward.
Thanks, Eric. I definitely do think it's important to take a regional approach and that we figure out the mechanism to best work together. So those are important conversations to be had. So thank you for that little tidbit, little intro to them. So we are sort of, let's see, we have about 10 minutes left. We sort of moved on from item 7 into our wrap up and general comments. So we can continue with that if there are other things to discuss. We do have at least 10 minutes. Yeah, Donna, go ahead.
I would just like to get a read on when we might know what kind of timeline we're working with, knowing that we do all need to go back to our councils. Is it possible to come up with some ballpark timeline today, or do we need to wait till mid-October? I just feel like we keep waiting. We're all ready to pull the trigger and do what we need to do and jump through the proper hoops. Just wanting to get a read on timeline if possible.
So one of the questions I was going to ask in the general comments and wrap up is HWMA obviously will be holding its October regularly scheduled board meeting. The board of directors will receive this document finalized. I would request that I didn't really hear all but one edit to one document. If you have any edits or any changes, I would request that you forward that to myself or Director Duffy, and we'll make sure that those are incorporated into the final documents. We'll be having a conversation with the HWMA board, not only about the compliance roadmap and the edible food recovery, but outlining next steps that we feel is in the best interest of HWMA and its member agencies, and talking through what exactly that means. Another question that I had would be, what is the temperature in the room to have another joint LTF HWMA board meeting that maybe can discuss some of the items and discussion that we would have at that October meeting, and then outline maybe a timeline for these steps to actually start happening? Is that somewhere in the ballpark? Okay.
If I could ask, Nancy did indicate that we could go to our voting bodies sooner than later to talk about the flow control tonnage piece. So would that be like a resolution we could bring forward explaining that, or I wasn't sure what the mechanism is that we could bring to our voting bodies?
Well, I think each jurisdiction will have its own idea for how best to do this. As Tom pointed out, the county's already incorporated flow control into its ordinance. And so the next step would be for the county to formally direct that flow control into this effort. And so I'm sorry, Robin, I honestly don't know whether you have a flow control provision over organics in the Eureka ordinance or not. But that would be something to start with. And then the other would be, yes, you could use a resolution committing, and then you could also just make sure that your council agrees with the idea as we work out the best form of the agreement in advance. Yes, certainly a resolution is always best. But I can't say right now exactly what the form of the ultimate agreement would look like. That we would hope all of the LTF would join.
That's perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, great. Are there any other wrap up or general comments or things we need to discuss as a group? Next steps? Hi, Carly, go ahead.
Hi, sorry, just one question I'm bringing all the way back to the edible food recovery. I'm not sure if Monica and Michael are still on the call, but just a question that came up for me as a part of the whole edible food recovery portion of this effort. As an organization that does that a fair amount, there's a fair amount of waste just in essence when you do food recovery. We have quite the relationship with Recology, who's great, but those fees are not insubstantial. So I was just wondering if any thought had been put into ensuring these nonprofits on the receiving end, aren't getting waste feeds that are detrimental to their operations, or if any thought had been put into that.
So I'm Monica White here from Edward Associates. I hung around just in case. So I'll just give you our perspective statewide and the recommendations that we're making. So I think it's incredibly important to acknowledge that your edible food recovery program is not a fourth can for compliance. And so what that means is that this isn't something that generators should view as just like, I have to do it. I'm just going to throw something at this to make my enforcer go away. It has to be brought with a lot of good communication on food safety, a lot of positive education and outreach. And then also the mechanisms need to be set up where a jurisdiction is very clearly having the back of a nonprofit in the case of what we call donation dumping, where a nonprofit is sending food that's already expired and not safe for consumption to the nonprofit. And they could say, hey, city X, I need some help here. They're not doing the right thing. And the city could then follow up and provide some enforcement against that generator. So what I will say is that's hugely impactful. And that's not something that's happening today, right? So there's this idea that Feeding America is a wonderful organization. They're doing incredible things across the state. It's important to note that within their current contracts, the generators are allowed to have up to 30% waste that they are donating to the nonprofit. So that is a really high margin, and it's something that we sort of grassroots and through a lot of our technical councils are starting to highlight that that's not really acceptable, right? We need to start working on these contracts and narrow this down to really empower our nonprofits and reduce waste on their side. The other thing I'll note that we really tried to do within our roadmap and action plan, and this is stuff that's going to develop as we start moving forward, is to give the nonprofits more resources to extend their shelf lives of their food and then reduce waste. So some of the things that we do in other areas are investing in reprocessing kitchens so that we can send end-of-life food to a kitchen to be repurposed into meals that can be frozen and then delivered to individuals. So there's a myriad of strategies. Some, like I said, on the front end, making sure that we are writing contracts that are empowering nonprofits to say no, and that they can't be afraid to tell a generator that this is donation dumping. It's unacceptable, and it actually is a huge liability for generators. To the back end where we're helping shore up the nonprofit infrastructure. But a lot of this stuff is going to happen as we move towards a regional program. We start the conversations, we start implementation, and it's all about partnerships, communication, relationships. So that's my comment.
Go ahead, Jenny.
I just wanted to add, just as we talk about kind of regional collaboration and partnerships, in addition to, everybody trying to possibly have a document to work together for, the flow control and the organics collection. I just wanted to make sure that the LTF and the HWMA board are aware that we're already having conversations regionally, the jurisdictions about developing an edible food recovery program and creating a position for, a manager of that program. So I just wanted the board and the LTF to know that that effort is underway already.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. Tom?
Just want to throw out there while we're talking about it, since you brought it up, if the food recovery organizations are a big part of our compliance and a big part of our community, and I would think we would find a way to cover the cost of any of their excess material that had to go back into the garbage system. So thinking about our 901 account, what our rates are, other things like that, because they should not be penalized for helping our community.
Right, that's a really good point. And with that, as we approach 5:30, I think we'll wrap it up and move on to adjournment. We each have the HWMA Board of Directors meeting is October 13th at 5:30, and like Eric mentioned, we'll be officially receiving this report. And then the LTF, your next meeting is October 24th at 11 a.m. Is there anything else, Eric, or anyone else wants to add?
No, Vice Chair Hogan, I believe that's good.
All right. Well, then we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.